Marbs. We're back with Training Grounds Part 4. Guys, I'm going to jump right into it because we're going to do chapters 41 and 42. So in chapter 41, 2 full years have passed. Can you imagine? Sometimes I don't even remember what I did this morning. Furthermore, it takes 2 years for the cupbearer to remember Joseph. But here's why. Pharaoh had 2 consecutive dreams in which skinny cows were consuming 7 fat cows. It was 7 skinny cows consuming 7 fat cows. Yeah, I promise you, I don't make this up, okay? Read your Bible, it's in there. Then another one with good grain being consumed by not so good grain. And somehow he expected that the wise men of Egypt and the magicians could have interpreted what that meant. How could you even think those dreams through? I'm just wondering. It sounds like Pharaoh could have had one too many before bed, right? But dreams like these happen all the time in the Bible, and God still gives those dreams even to this day. This is why Joe said, dreams are God's business. Just because I have to, let me mention it, right? I think it was like Daniel, a king. Daniel wasn't a king, but in the book of Daniel, a king had a dream and then was like, not only will you interpret it, but you will also tell me what dream I had. If not, you will be deleted. Daniel chapter 2, guys, it's there. King Nebuchadnezzar, he was something else, okay? Listen, there are no coincidences with God. It might have taken 2 years, but the cupbearer came through for Joel and was like, boss, I don't really like to talk about this, but you remember the time you sent me to prison? Well, there was a Hebrew guy, and he was able to interpret both my dream and the former baker's dream. And everything happened just as he said. I stand here today, restored to my previous position. Pharaoh said, okay, send for him, okay? Joseph was not coming like a prisoner, okay? Your boy was dressed for success. He was meeting Pharaoh after all. Pharaoh said, I have heard you can tell people what their dreams mean. Y'all, I always love Joe's response when he asks when he answers this question, right? It's like he says in verse 16, it is beyond my power to do this, but God can tell you what it means and set you at ease. Joe is like, man, I'm just a shepherd boy from Hebron Valley. I need God for everything. Then he gets to listening and telling Pharaoh his dream. First of all, because you had 2 dreams, it's definitely going to happen. You just needed that 3rd sign of confirmation, and here I am. 7 years of plenty in the land. Egypt will be the place to be because it will be so appealing and full of many riches and a sustainable economy. Woo, that was hard to say. But you must save some of it for a rainy day, because right after will be 7 years of famine. It will be so bad that people will forget the good years. Verse 31. How many of y'all truly remember what happened during COVID times? My kids be telling me about stuff that happened during COVID times, and I'm debating them down that didn't happen. Of course, they link it to a photo or a video or event, something from that period, and then I'm like, oh yeah, that did happen. Wow. That is how bad the famine would be. Pharaoh said, you tell me to look for someone to be in charge of storing the grains for the entire kingdom, but you're the only one who could tell me what my dream meant. Here's my signet ring, and provide the royal clothing that my second in command wears, because you are being promoted to VP. Vice Pharaoh. I don't know. I like that. Vice Pharaoh, right? Anyway, because you're the only one who is qualified for this job. Verses 44. Pharaoh was like, I am Pharaoh, but no one will lift a hand or foot in this entire land of Egypt without your approval, Joe. Okay? Like, it's not going to happen unless you say yes or no. Joe got a wife and the children before the famine came. And chapter 41 ends with this, verse 57. And people from all around came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe throughout the world. They didn't even say throughout the state or the area, throughout the world. So let's go to Genesis 42. Because Genesis 42 is giving me life, okay? Jacob tells his 10 sons, this is the NLT version, guys, if you're reading along. Why are you standing around looking at one another? I have heard there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy enough grain to keep us alive. Otherwise, we'll be deleted. Some kids, you really have to be over dramatic with them because they live in a very dramatic filled life, okay? Or Jacob could have really been scared. He might wither away. You 10 go. The last of my sons, Benjamin, stays put. I can't afford to lose another one of Rachel's children. Your boy Joseph is now governor, all of Egypt, and in charge of selling grain to all of the people. If you're now tuning in, guys, this is Training Grounds Part 4. We got parts 1, 2, and 3 that you can catch up about the story about Joseph on tjmarbell.com. Back to the story. Governor Joe recognized his brothers immediately and spoke to them harshly. His brothers still couldn't recognize their brother. Now, though, I think he may have aged a bit, and his appearance in their memory would have been of an 18-year-old boy, not an early 30s governor. Okay, he probably was the youngest governor at that time. I'm not sure, so don't quote me on that. Joseph remembered the dreams he had, then immediately began accusing them of being spies. Marbs, do you think this was like payback for his brothers? Because, bro, what? Joseph keeps saying, you guys are coming to spy my country. The brothers keep saying, we just came to buy some food, man. At one point, the brothers are like, sir, this is verse 13. There are actually 12 of us. We, your servants, are brothers, son of a man living in land of Canaan. Our youngest brother is back there with our father right now, and one of our brothers is no longer with us. Oh, so now we're spilling all the beans. Joe wasn't having it. So he said, we will do a test. Bring your youngest brother here to Egypt. One of you will stay in prison while the remaining return home. Don't come back without your youngest brother. Jacob is going to lose it. Just let you know. Little brother Joseph locks Simon up in prison. Well, really, he locks all of them up, but tells them to choose who is going to stay, while the rest of the group takes the grain back to their starving families. Joseph couldn't let his brothers' families, including his father's, suffer from the brothers' errors. But Ben got to come to Egypt. In verse 21, we see some type of record that Joe did, in verse 21, we see some type of record that Joe did fight back. We knew he may have back when his brothers were sending him away, but now in the latter section, the 10 say, we saw the anguish when he pleaded for his life, but we wouldn't listen. That's why we're in this trouble. Here go Reuben. Didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? So Reu, this is the case of birds of a feather flock together situation, right? Because even though they threw him in the well, that is your brother though. But it is eerily close to Jesus' crucifixion. And all of a sudden, once Jesus is captured and sentenced to judgment, all his followers don't know him. Peter, I'm talking about you. It got real quick, real fast, okay? Verse 24. Now he turned away from them and began to weep. Joseph is listening to his brothers as they discuss what they will do with this rock and a hard place situation. He begins to cry, so much so that he needs to step away to compose himself. I am sure the brothers are like, what is wrong with him? He's not even our family, man. He is an Egyptian. So Jesus told the disciples many times he would be crucified and that he would suffer because he was about his father's business. John 3:16, because God so loved the world. And he still loves it. I don't know why I say loved, but because God so loved the world. Even though these men were Joseph's enemies, they remained love in his heart for his brothers. It pained him to see them debating over what they did to him, to their father, and how they should proceed with what he was asking them to do. Joseph, like Jesus, had a real human experience. Marbs, this chapter is long. Simon stayed as a prisoner while the others went back with the grain and the payment for the food in the grain bags. But they didn't know that. That was discovered on the journey home and later confirmed when they were telling Jacob all of what was going on. Joel scared them good, okay? They're spies, check. One bro stay as a prisoner, check. Bring the youngest bro back to Egypt, check. Thieves, because how you gonna go, right, and get the grain and bring back the money you paid for it, check. Verse 28, latter section. Trembling, they said to each other, what has God done to us? Results of your actions, my friends. Jacob said, you are robbing me of my children. Verse 36, Joseph gone, Simon gone. Now Benjamin has to go too. Everything is going against me. These brothers' actions are seriously affecting everyone, like a curse on the family or something. Reuben is always trying to save a person. Like, if Ben doesn't come back, Dad, you can have my 2 sons. Shaking my head emoji. Okay? This is a very drama-filled family. That's all I could say. What are we seeing as a training ground experiences? Tasks and skills, languages. Joe spoke the language of Egypt and the language of his homeland, verse 23. Laws and regulations. Joe knew if he accused his brothers of being spies, even if false, it would give them cause for imprisonment. He was falsely accused and then imprisoned, verse 16. Economics. Egypt was also thriving on the selling of the grain to the neighboring communities, verse 6. Governor Joe, God provided Joseph insight on how he could govern a country in the economic growth of the society was thriving even during a 7-year famine. I think this is where the meaning of saving for a rainy day comes in handy, okay? I'm thinking this over. Why does Joseph keep saying, if you are honest men? He calls them spies. Yet the only one time I see lies told is the telling of Joel, being attacked by a wild animal, even though the brothers had sold him because he was very much alive, right? I guess what I'm saying, Marbs, is it the character of the brothers to be liars? Joe did report his brothers to his dad about their approach to running their business. If you know, chime in, let me know. Why did Joseph persistently call his brothers liars when he first saw them in Egypt again? Was it all a show, or were they really deceitful? The Bible verse is Matthew chapter 6, verse 21, which states, "For where your treasure is, your heart will also be." NIV. Also found in Luke chapter 12, 34. This verse means that what you value most, your time, money, and devotion, is where your heart and treasure, is where your heart and interest will be. And that's what the Bible says, not TJ. Until next time, take care.